there's a lot of information in topic 8. And also, just have a look at how many Robbins PowerPoint chapters that you have to go through. And again, topic 8 is part of test number 2, and I'll cover a little bit of test number 2 as we go along. But I think I explicitly let you know which slides are appropriate. And if it's not there in the presentation, just let me know. But I think in some of them, you don't have to go through all the presentations, but the presentation slides. But the key thing is to understand, where I'm routing you to, when I talk about what's highlighted, what's in yellow, the golden keys, those kind of things. But we're going to cover a whole slew of areas. So a lot around human resource management, some around management, innovation, and change, understanding groups and teams. And, this is where, I introduced you to, this forming, norming, storming. And so I'm going to kind of cover that, in this particular topic. So, some of that may be on the test, all right? So that you know that, and that's what you saw when you put together your particular learning team charters. And then we're going to talk a fair amount about leadership. And then the last part, there's some key things around understanding communication. And so that will be highlighted as well to give you, where you should be looking at and what you should be looking at to be able to answer any kind of questions on the test. So really that's what we're covering. And again, so what's highlighted in yellow, what's bolded, what's arrowed, you'll see some arrows sometimes, and then you'll see these golden keys. So that's to kind of really get through all that material that you have to cover. And there's a fair amount of deliverables for topic 8. So let me just start with the test. So the test will be running from 8 a.m. June the 5th, Friday, in the morning till Monday at 11:59 p.m. And again, the test content is topics 5, 6, 7, and 8. And again, it's 50 multiple choice and true false questions, mainly multiple choice questions. And there'll be no numerical computation type questions in those 50 questions. So basically, it's all driven on content. And again, you access, at this particular piece here, this is a test number 2 access. All right, and that's in topic 10. So that's where you get into it. Right. So right off the bat, here's some key documents that you should review to make sure that and if you've done your assignment well, and most of you have done really well on that number 3 assignment, you'll see a kind of review of what's going on. So a good review for theorists and theories. There's this assignment number 5 document in my Google Drive where it has a theorist of tools and techniques, and it's a table, so it just connects, so you see where that is. And then this brief history of management, we've covered this a few times. This is the supplement 1A that I augmented from Pearson Revel. And a key one is the 16 leadership theories in 15 minutes. So it's a really good review. It's a YouTube video, so you'll find that pretty enlightening, and then it'll kind of refresh all those things that you need to know, about leadership theories. Okay. So again, if you have a Chromebook, but we haven't had any issues lately, or but you do have a Chromebook, the system around lockdown doesn't cover some of the idiosyncrasies of Chromebook. So here's a few things to know if you do use a Chromebook. And again, get ready before this test and consult with the library. They're probably the best people to be able to help you, if you've got a problem with anything like that. So again, it's the front end of this process for the study approach. And you can see here, there's a lot of chapters to cover, the Robbins PowerPoints, but in Robbins chapter 2, it's only the test 2 slides from 17 to 30, and then the rest is all for test 3. And then these, how to motivate and lead. So go through those, and they'll be really good supplements to where I'm guiding you when I go through this. But again, it's the commentary PowerPoints that are so important. and that's where to really kind of work off of to be able to do that. And then supplemented by the Robbins PowerPoint chapters. And then again, the test to practice tests are in topic 8. They're not identical questions to what's in the test, but it'll really give you a good idea of what's there. And then, review the Blackboard participation activities too. I mean, there's some areas in there that you've covered, and I noticed that, for 6A and 6B, a fair amount of you have not finished that. And I'll recommend that you do finish that before the test, because it'll really gonna put you in good standing, right? And then if you're really stuck, you go into the Blackboard video presentations, because they're so specific. Dr. Power had, put through a whole slew of really good videos for this course. And then there is the course e-text, if you still need things to look at. But again, access test number 2 and topic 10, test your device for Respondus lockdown and webcam capability well before the test, and you should be in good shape. Okay, so here's all the deliverables. And what I noticed, I had a question that came up the other day, and they said, oh, I went into participation topic A, and I couldn't find the download for this least preferred customer. Well, the download is just below it under Fiedler, and this is the PDF that you open up to be able to do the survey on. All right, it's not part of Pearson Revel survey. And the thing is, what I want you to do is just get the number. You don't have to upload the your circled response, just the number to go into the calculations, and we'll get into that when I get onto the slide for 8A. All right, for the participation activity. All right, and we're going to cover Fiedler in the presentation in terms of Fiedler kind of started the front end of this this situation analysis to pair up with your management style, and then the other guys, and I can't remember their names right now. They elaborated on that. White and the other guy, and I'll bring that up when we get to that slide. Okay, so that's where that is. So group B, topic 8B is a group submission, and you look at the role of organization in developing sustaining a diverse, inclusive workplace, and we'll cover that in the slides. And these key areas will, you're best to kind of go through all those surveys to really get set up to do the work and to understand what's going to be on the test, right? All of this is due, on June the 5th, right? So that you know that. So in chapter 6, you're going to look at human resource management, and that's key. And things have changed, a lot from where things were, when I was, coming into the workforce. HR basically just used to, hire you and tell you all the benefits you have, and that was the end of the story. But now it's getting a lot more sophisticated, and they want to make sure that, when they put together a job description and they track, how you perform in that job description well after you've been hired. Well, then they know how to refine that and make sure that they're hiring the right people to get into the right jobs going forward. So that's a big deal, and it's more now. It's not only recruiting; it's recruiting and retention, because statistically, especially in a white collar job, it takes about 6 times the annual salary and expenses to recruit a replacement. So that gets to be a very expensive proposition. So that's where HR is really making a move. And not only that, in my experience, when on our management team, we had an HR rep that was essentially operating as an officer and would be integral in the strategies that we developed. So HR is playing a really big role in today's world. Okay. So then managing innovation and change, and I mean, this is going to be the whole remainder of your career, and and you're going to look at disruptive technologies, especially what AI is going to bring in terms of robotics and replacing various functions and organizations and stuff. So that's really important hit on, and you really need to get a sense of what is the distinction between managing change and transformation. And and we're going to get into that a little bit, as we get into the presentation. Okay, understanding groups and teams. Well, again, if you get into situational management, so it's basically not only what it is that the worker has to do, but understanding if the worker is ready and willing. All right, so we're going to get into that when we talk about situational management going forward. Okay. And then leadership. And, I've been talking all along that, at one time there was management and then there was leadership. Today's world, you've got to be a good manager to be a good leader, and you've got to be a good leader to manage. Right? So it's pretty well integrated. And once you understand that and you know how to channel the information and do what you need to do under both those functions, you'll be a much better leader, going forward. Okay, and then managing communication, we're going to do a little bit around that, but it's really around the technology of the communication itself. Okay, excuse me. So, so 8A, individual exercise, and what you're doing is, you want to put your score on this piece, and again, you go to, did I put it down here? No, I didn't. Okay, so essentially, just below this posting in topic 8, you'll see this Fiedler LPC, and this is the link to get into this survey that you fill out. And you fill out this survey, and then you calculate the score, and then that's all I'm looking for here is a score. And then you say, okay, does that make sense? What type of leader are you based on the least preferred coworker questionnaire? And you're going to be predominantly task oriented or predominantly relationship oriented. And that's where Fiedler kind of started the situation around, hey, you can be a certain kind of leader, but you got to fit in the organization that you're managing. And so what he started was, okay, well, let's change the situation to meet the manager, and then and then the successors of that started getting a lot more refined on where that was going. Okay, so that's what that piece is all about. And then here we start getting into Fiedler's contingency theory of leadership. And what I strongly recommend is go to this link. This video describes the whole process in about 10 minutes and really gives you a good purview of what what Fiedler really intended. But I'm going to show you an example, just after this slide, and what you're going to do from your LPC questionnaire. If you're greater than 64, that means that you're a relationship-oriented type of manager. If it's less than 57, it's going to be task-oriented. So what Fiedler said is that, hey, he came up with 8 situations and showed, where a task-oriented leader would thrive, like right here and really not succeed at all here in these kind of situations. And then where a relationship-oriented leader would thrive, in this area. So I'll talk about that. So essentially, what Fiedler's contingency theory of leadership says is that you assess your form of leadership, and then you look at how you connect or with the level of compliance with with that situation. And he started with he started with, okay, let's try to manipulate the situation, and that's really hard. And that's where Blanchard came in and said, no, let's take a look at how you can have different styles to meet those situations rather than try to fit a situation to your predominant type of management style. So that's where that's going. All right, so here's just an example in that video that I told you about, and this is an example of an advertising agency. All right, and what it is it's a manager with good relationship between leader and members, and what these 8 situations are related for is the type of leader-member relations in that situation, the task structure in that situation, and the position power. And what position power is essentially is that, do you have the power to hire and fire? And if your subordinates know that, they know that, hey, if they don't perform, they're down the road. So that's what roughly the position power is all about. So for this particular example, of a good relationship, sort of a relationship oriented leader, you can see that this particular situation is the best in terms of performance. All right, and this particular situation, is the worst, when it comes to these three components of the situation. Right, so that's where that is. Okay, so again, preparation for 8B. These are these main three surveys. Take a look at those. Before you even attempt 8B, and you're going to do this as a group as well, because really you're looking at the intercultural sensitivity scale, the multicultural awareness, and the company culture assessment, because that's going to bring out what the main outcome of 8B is all about. Okay, so again, 8B is due on the 5th. So what you can do is, after reviewing the slides, from 93 to 96, of the 135 slide deck in topic 8, it'll give you a little more information about what is surface level diversity. And again, they're in this presentation as well. What is deep level diversity and what is hidden diversity? And those definitions, we're going to get you to answer questions on that. So, doing these surveys, these main surveys, will give you a little more context on how to do that. Okay, so let's get into it. So what service level diversity is? It's the form of characteristics of individuals, and you can see this, what's going on. All right, you can actually you actually see how people behave in the work setting, and it includes and not limited to the age. So the age statistics around that, the body size, visible, and those things. And then there's deep level diversity, and they're not exactly non-observable. And really what it is in a culture, you'll say, well, this is how we do things around here, right? So that's a deep level diversity, because it's shaped by attitudes and values and beliefs, right? That drive certain behaviors. And I've talked about this earlier, is that your core values drive how you make decisions, and there's a certain a set of core values that are embraced in an organization. So that means people in that organization will behave a certain way because of that core value set, right? So that's the deep level diversity. And then you get into hidden diversity. And that's diversity, it's sort of, the bottom of the iceberg. People don't really see that, like sexual orientation. Maybe in a certain organization, people with a different sexual organization will not demonstrate that, because they know that the minute that they do, it's not going to go well for them, kind of thing. So that's the example for hidden diversity. Okay, so how does this all fit? Well, if you take a look at especially what's going on in the U.S., the right part of the government, the right wing part, said, hey, you know what, this diversity, equity, inclusiveness, it's holding us back as a society. And so they've really kind of pushed on institutions to back off on DEI. But what to know is that DEI is still alive, right? And it's fundamental to, especially in a democratic society, and a society that has some conscious about the quality of life and everything else. So they're not dead in the U.S. As people think, and I guess likely what will happen is when that administration goes through its term limits, things will probably get back to maybe not where it was, but to where it could be. And again, this ties into the new levels of management principles, where it's going to be really important to drive trust and drive caring, because if we don't have that, then AI might take us in a different direction. So those are the kind of things to consider, around DEI, starting, from where we are today. Okay, so if you look at sustaining a diverse and inclusive workplace, well, here's where it kind of, these are the different conditions. It may start with, discrimination and fairness, and so that the conflicts are not discussed. There's no cross-cultural exchange. And oh, by the way, there's a couple of questions in the Amazon, assignment number 4 that you can answer, that this is going to help you kind of understand how to answer. All right. So here's where it starts. It's discrimination, and then what happens is, and if you look at, in the 60s, when the movement for DEI started, they all of a sudden they gained in the U.S. They gained access and legitimacy. The only reason I'm talking about the U.S. itself is because that's something I know a little bit more about. I'm not so sure what happened in Canada at that particular time, but the whole civil rights movement started in the 60s, and that brought access and legitimacy to do that. And then, in the latter years, especially, in the 90s and the early 2000s, employers started integrating those concepts into the workplace, right? And the learning. So that's how it goes to, and then at the end of the day, you've got work group processes and outcomes, that are going through. And if you can see, some organizations have made, great strides, and I talk about corporate social responsibility. If you go into the website for Van City Credit Union, they're probably one of the most strongest leaders in corporate social responsibility. And inside of that, they are sustaining a diverse and inclusive workplace. So that's where to kind of look at it and see where, how does that translate into management principles? Okay, so what are the benefits? Well, it's no secret that board of directors that have a diverse board of directors makes better decisions. And it's been proven, and you can see it in the stock exchange, to be able to show, how well a company's doing, because they know, what level of board diversity that there is, amongst a lot of those leading institutions. You get a lot more increased creativity and innovation. Why? You have different perspectives that come together, right? And kind of work off each other. Improve stakeholder representation. That's where, the more that a organization reflects the base of their customers, the clearer it's going to be, how to set that vision to be able to satisfy their customers. And then I talked about enhanced corporate social responsibility, and that's where we get into triple bottom line and those kind of things. Okay, so you notice that this is a yellow line here, right? So I'm talking about tokenism. So there's a lot of companies out there, that it's just lip service. They purport to do something and they spin it in a certain way, and it gives the appearance that people are being treated fairly. But what's going on is just more stress, and it's extremely visible and invisible at the same time. And guess what? There's a higher burnout rate, and that's that tells the story. Okay, so the role of management, when you're bringing in people into the organization, the interviews have to be structured, and why is to avoid the bias in recruiting. And the thing is, we talked about biases way at the start of the course, and really that shapes a lot of our decision making if we're not aware of what's going on. And the thing is that the better that you can have like diversified mentoring relationships, well, then all of a sudden now you can anchor those core values into that culture, and make it an inclusive corporate culture. All right. So, in motivating and leading, here's where I'm getting now to the difference between, managing and leading. So motivating and leading, it's leadership, it's leading teams, it's cross-cultural leadership, it's corporate culture, leading through change. Cross-cultural leadership is so important, especially if you're in an international based corporation that has to deal with not only different corporate cultures, but different national cultures. And if you understand that better, then you're more enlightened on how to lead. So the leadership, what is it all about? Notice there's a fair amount of highlighting here. Leaders influence others. That's the key part. They have they have this sense of communicating why something is so important and bringing the information to the people to build that trust. And it becomes a process of influencing. And I think what's missing in this one is inspiring individuals or groups towards achievement of goals. So that's why, that part of the component is so important, because, in a lot of cases, the workforce is getting more and more smart. They're more and more educated. And you can't bluff them. So you have to be earnest, and you have to find ways to really engage them, to be able to change behaviors to focus towards getting to the outcomes where the organization wants to go. So role of the leader, you build a unifying vision, you develop a strategy, you get people on board. And again, developing that strategy is talking about the why. Why are we doing this? How are we going to do this better? And then what this encompasses and what the targets are. And you have to get people on board. You focus on results. You innovate for the future, and you lead yourself. And again, something to know about a leader is sometimes leadership is to know when to follow. If you've got engaged employees that really want to get something done, you let them go and let them lead and support them. All right. So let's go back to the manager now. The manager, we talked about these 4 functions of management, planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. And what does that translate into? Well, that now you're implementing that vision and strategy. So guess what? If you know how to inspire about that vision, and then you get into the implementation, man, you've got a really strong combination to get to change behaviors to really create success. And you provide clear direction. You clearly communicate the goals to employees. And I hope that I've made that compelling in terms of when you write goals, the clearer that you are and the more comprehensive that you are to show them that it's doable, the more success that you're going to have in leading people. You select the right individuals for each task, those kind of things. So understand, this entire piece of role of the manager, and you can see that it's highlighted here, right? But here, I want you to, kind of focus on finals, right? So, he did a lot in terms of functions of management, and he started with, he called the 6 functions of management, and then the information got down into the 4. But don't lose sight of what Farrell is all about here in terms of role of the manager. This is just this is an advertisement right here. There's nothing on here for a test, but this guy's my hero, all right? Simon Sinek, he talked about the why. And if you listen, here's one of his TED Talks. It's just an amazing summary of how that drives and helps leadership, get to engage people to do the right things. Okay, so let's look at the distinctions between managers and leaders. And this is a slide pulled right out of your deck slides in topic 8. But you take a look at the managers. Well, they do have an implementation focus, no doubt about that. And they focus on the what and how. And the leaders have a direction and guidance focus on the why and how, right? What are we doing? Well, the manager part would do the planning and budgeting, but the leaders create the vision and setting the direction. So understand that, they do come together, but there are kind of distinct type of focuses to those two. And if you can integrate that as a professional, you're going to be very successful. Okay, not going to talk about this. It's just this is a book called Switch. It changed my life. It talks about how to manage change. It's probably the best change management book I ever read. And I just wanted to make the connection that, hey, it really covers all aspects of managers and leaders in undergoing change and understanding transformation. All right. So if you ever want to read a good book, it reads like a rag, and you can get it read in, in a few days. So it's really good information. And oh, just one more thing is that this is the Heath brothers, and one brother was an educator and the second brother was a marketer. And those two skills put together really made this book so compelling and easy to read and easy to understand, and really kind of inspires you to be able to understand, how change can be done. Okay. So again, we talked about the various chapters. Be sure to review the related eText PowerPoint slides. And now we're getting into trait theory. And you can see there's a lot of highlighting going on here. So you need to know a fair amount about trait theory. And that's, there's certain inborn or innate qualities or characteristics that make people, that make some people a leader versus someone who's not a leader. And they might be personality, they might be physical factors. I mean, if you look at, there's a lot of tall, strong men with deep voices that, came out of sports that are running companies today. That's one aspect of it. Is it silver bullet? No, but there is some sense to that, and to just to understand that, so that you can focus exclusively, on what's possible. But having said that, there's other aspects to it. But it's one theory that came about, and it really kind of brought into height, intellect, extroversion, fluency, and other traits. But here's the limiting thing, right? Trait theory focuses exclusively on the leader and doesn't really look at the follower, right? And that's where like Blanchard and House's path goal started to look at focusing on the followers as well. There's two sides to that equation, so you have to be a leader with a particular style that will resonate with a particular group of followers, and you understand that those followers need different type of directional engagement and everything else because of where they are in their life cycle of experience and knowledge, right? So that's where it kind of goes from trait theory to situational management, with Blanchard and House. Okay, so how do you apply that? Well, the trait approach is that by participating in various tests, you can get a sense of, what kind of leader am I? And some organizations use personality tests to find the right people. And I'm a big believer of Myers-Briggs, and I had tremendous success in the organizations. I moved up the ladder quite a bit, going through TELUS, and every time that I got a new team, TELUS had an expertise of Myers-Briggs in their HR department, and we could do a Myers-Briggs portfolio of surveys in that group and understand who everybody was and how they needed to interact. And I'll tell you, it worked, and it really worked well. And I've always had the success of creating these very integrated, I've got your back type organizations that supported each other and really understood how to work together to get things done. So there's a lot to do with that. I haven't had any direct experience with leadership trait questionnaires, but a lot of the I've come across with management consultants coming into the organization and kind of enlightening me on that kind of stuff. Here's another one. So to know how to apply trait theory, there's a link to this gal, and it's a quick 13 minutes, and she could show you after identifying your weak points, how you can begin to work on improving yourself. So I think it's a good piece because you don't want to discount traits, and you try to leverage as much as you can, and then look at other areas of improving your management skills. Okay. So here's again, this is highlighted, I think, mainly to know, the main categories of leadership traits, how much drive you have, your desire to lead, honesty and integrity, the amount of self-confidence that you have, the amount of cognitive intelligence you have, the amount of emotional intelligence, and if you take a look at, Goldman, I mean, he's brought this to light, in modern management theories as well, job relevant knowledge and extroversion. Okay, so those are the key things that you should take a look at. And what they do is they isolate characteristics that differentiate leaders from non-leaders. So here's how you separate yourself from the pack, right? And it might even be, how well your dress fit with the culture of the organization is, and that will have an effect on how you're perceived in that organization. So, you got to use everything you can. All right. So again, it can bring in problems though. If you have a particular, set of traits, you may misalign with the culture. And if you're doing that, chances are you're going to decrease employee morale because you can't relate to them. So you're going to run into inefficiencies. And what happens is people leave their bosses, right? They don't leave the organization, and you may have high turnover. So just understand that, it's a strength and it's a weakness as well. So you've got to understand, what can you do to be able to improve your lot in terms of your management skills and capability, and then know, what works, right? And a key strength can sometimes be a weakness. Just remember that. Okay. So talking about, again, emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman comes to, the fore all the time, and that's somebody that you should be, looking at or being educated about in this course. But it's all about self-awareness, self-management, self-motivation, a big one on empathy, and then social skills. And again, that's going to really take you into, the new era of management principles in terms of empathy and trust, right? Are going to become the currency, in the next few years based on all the disruptions that AI is going to cause in the workplace. Okay, again, the EI is the best predictor of who will emerge as a leader. So, take heed on that. Lewin, again, you can see that, there's going to be questions around different theorists. He does, the four areas. And I think, people kind of look at laissez-faire, where they think that, well, you just let people do what they want to do. And that's not the point, all right? The laissez-faire is that you have highly skilled and motivated people, and the last thing that they want is to be micromanaged. So you give them the direction and you let them do what they do best, and then you measure, and you give them targets, and then you manage accordingly. All right. So because if you don't, you're going to disengage them, and you'll have some lost productivity if you're not careful. Right. So those are the four key ones, and to be aware of what Lewin is all about. Just wanted to bring up social loafing. And again, I brought that up in the learning charter, but it happens everywhere. I mean, I've been on teams, on corporate teams where one person just really didn't pick up, and everybody had to work around them. And in that particular setting, it doesn't last very long because, a good manager to overlooking that, or a good leader will say, well, that person doesn't fit, and then what happens, to them when they get bypassed or put out the organization or everything else. So understand this article here, like the new free rider, how to keep social loafing from ruining your teams. That's a good thing to want to know. So Kurt Lewin, pioneer in social organizational applied psychology, another, person that, we're talking about this guy again, or his leadership styles. But again, the three core ones are authoritarian, participative, and delegative. So, be aware of that piece. There's his styles again. So, I mentioned this, many times, is that another theorist comes on the scene, and apprentices basically with mentors. So a lot of the work is carried over from theorist to theorist and improved. Right. So Robert Blake and Jane Mountain, they basically looked at, what's, what other theories are out there like McGregor's X and Y, and then said, hey, how can we complement that? So what they did was they came up with a chart to be able to show, where different types of styles are, and where's the middle of the road, and then what kind of style fits with what. So you can see in their leadership approach, they put theory Y and theory X sort of at the boundaries, and then somewhere in the middle, you're a little bit of everything else, right? To go through. So they wanted to find a leadership approach in between McGregor's X and Y theories. So this grid method is something to know about. Okay, and then if you want to know more about that, here's a breakdown of the different types of these key areas in that grid. Again, another review. A lot of you had mentioned McGregor's X and Y theory in your assignment 2, and then part in assignment 3. So here's just a review of what's going on. So contingency means it depends, right? So it started with Fiedler, and then Blanchard and House kind of took that and went further. So Fiedler started it. Blanchard worked on this situational leadership, and then House was on this path goal theory. So you should really get a sense of what this is all about. So define leadership styles in different types of situations. Fiedler's approach. Identify the appropriate combination of style and situation. So how do you fit, the situation to the style is mainly Fiedler's, and then Blanchard talks about, how do you fit the styles, and a lot of major HR firms like, kind of elite firms that are international, they'll say you should have at least, 4 or 5 different management styles that you can work from. You will have your predominant management styles, but you need to adjust, to make the situation work. Okay, so I'm getting back now to least preferred coworker and doing your score. And again, so this is a participation activity 8A. So if you've got a least preferred coworker score of greater than 64, and that's what it is that the least preferred coworker is that somebody who doesn't pulls out all the stops to give you the information because they're not worried about being worried about being nurtured or sticking around. They'll give you the answer kind of thing. So that's where they came up with this least preferred coworker. And then if you're less than 57, you're task oriented. Now if you're in between, all right, if you're in between, well then you kind of have to decide, where you are. Which way do you think that you lean, and where do you think you are? And I think that will involve a lot more self-introspection, and then look at other surveys to really give you a hint as where you are, because it's good to know what your original core values are, what your preferences are, to really have that baseline as to where am I now, and then where do I want to be, and then you can really plan to be able to improve your situation, your management capabilities, your knowledge, all those other things. Okay, so again, I kind of went through this, so I won't go through it again, but you can see now situations not good with a relationship-oriented style. You can see that. So these guys here, these situations, if you've just got one style of being relationship-oriented, you really want to kind of manage the the actual attributes of the situation in terms of leader-member relations, the task structure itself, and position power. So task structure, maybe if you if you want to make things work a little better, well then you manipulate that. So if you take a look at McDonald's, the task structure is rigid, right? There's timers on everything. There's buzzers. You flip the hamburger after 3 minutes or whatever it is. So those are the kind of things that will allow McDonald's to take just about any person off the street, train to make the McDonald burger because it's high in task structure. So you don't need very much, a leader-member relationship. They're just they either cut it or they don't, right? All right. So that's where that piece is. And then, inside of the leadership, there's the situation, there's the follower, and there's the leader. And that's where you start getting into Blanchard and House in terms of what's going on, so that it's kind of left, Fiedler to improve on where that's going. So, so a leadership theory that focuses, with situational leadership, right? It focuses on the readiness of followers. Okay, and that's where Blanchard really comes in. So, in the readiness, extent to which people have the ability and the willingness to accomplish a specific task. So that's where that comes into play. So what it means then, so if they've they've got a lot of experience, um, and the thing is that they're motivated. All you need to do is sell them on the issue. All right. So the selling leader provides general direction, supportive behavior, because people are there. They're high in the relationship with the leader, and they're high in the capabilities of what they do, and they're willing to do something. So that's really how this situational leadership piece comes together. And Hershey and Blanchard. So what they did was they looked and focused on the followers, and they come up with these ratings. So if you're an R4D4, that means that the workers are able and willing to do what is asked, and what you can do then is, uh, that you can manage them in a very different way, right? So in this case here, in terms of supportive behavior and directive behavior, this one here is, you coach them because they're ready for that. But if you have a low supportive and low directive, it means they're not skilled, uh, um, and and sorry. Uh, yeah, so if they're not skilled, they have low competence, and they're high commitment, well, then you can be very directive and tell them, what they need to do to get things done, right? So it's a different approach on how to adjust your leadership styles based on, where the follower is in terms of, are they skilled? Do they have the experience? And then are they willing to do what they need? So if you want a better, a really good explanation, I want to take you to this video. You click on this video off of this PowerPoint presentation, and it'll really explain this in a very good way. I think it's only about a 10-minute video. It's worth really going through there to really understand what's going on, right? And then goes through the different types of leadership styles in terms of directing and coaching and supporting and delegating. So, just, as the contrast, for directing, associated with autocratic leaders, all right? Leader makes all the decisions, whereas on a delegating, leader provides minimal direction, right? So that's where that goes, and that will explain this much better, all right? And what you want to do is you want to map development level to leadership style, all right? So if the employee is low in development, doesn't know what to do, well, then, you're going to direct them. But if they're high in development, well, you're going to delegate them because you don't want to micromanage them. That's what this is all about. So when it gets to, House's path goals theory, it's essentially, about the follower again. The leader's job is to assist the follower in attaining their goals and to provide the necessary direction and support to ensure that the goals are compatible, with the organization. Okay, so here's another one. Another video, that this chap does a really great, it's only a 6-minute video. It'll really kind of go through this, path goal theory to really give you a good understanding of what that's all about. Okay, and then Victor Vroom, right? It came up with this, simplified expectancy model. And what it is that, you start with the individual effort, and you create an expectation of what they're supposed to do, right? And they will respond. And then when they're responding, then all of a sudden now you introduce some reward linkage into that. and that will then motivate them to even do much better. And then, you know, so if the organizational rewards are not significant enough, you know, there'll be low expectancy. So that, you know, here's where you really make it attractive, you know, for people to, and the rewards are tailored, you know, to motivate those people, and then they'll even perform much better. So that's how this model starts. You know, it starts with individual effort into individual performance, and then organizational rewards that will drive that individual performance for people working together, and then working, you know, towards setting individual goals for that performance. So again, here's House's path goals theory. You can see that these are highlighted, so you should know, you know, what these things are. So if you're directive, you know, you let subordinates know what's expected of them. You're supportive, you know, you look at their needs, and you know, servant leadership comes in, you know, around the supportive piece. If you look at participative, well, then you consult with them, and you engage them in doing things, and you find resources for them, and then the achievement is, you know, setting challenging goals and expect followers to perform at the highest level. I can remember when I first started working, I was on shift work, and I was on a production team, and this was when I just got out of school, and shift boss would always tell us how well the previous shift did in terms of production, and we were, you know, we jump on that and we try to improve, and it's amazing that how easy that worked. Okay, so situational variables break down into two things. All right, this is key. All right, you can see that it's highlighted. Personal characteristics, you know, include individuals' motivation, their readiness, their role identity, and then environmental variables. The leader must include factors such as organization and that. So this is really, you know, creating, you know, the workplace ideal situation to be able to deal with the key personal characteristics of the workforce that's doing that work for you. So these need to work together. All right. And again, you can see this little key arrow here, and so that you pay attention to the situation where the follower lacks self-confidence, and that's where, you know, supportive leadership comes in to be able to give that worker some confidence, you know, and then, you know, work them through to increase to achieve the work outcome. All right, so here's a key thing that you should understand. All right, so now, you know, we talked about this. So here's where House puts this path goal theory into place. You know, so the participative leader, you know, subordinates with internal locus of control. You know, and what that means is, you know, they're self-motivated. It comes from within, all right, and they have this high ability. And then characteristics of the you know, the environment. Well, high structure, you know, it leads to greater follower satisfaction, you know, and in that way, you know, they don't need a leader, you know, telling them, you know, what to do. And then high formalization, direct leadership can again reduce worker satisfaction. You know, you know, you need to worry where that is, you know, uh, and then in a team environment, you know, you have these social supports, all right? So high formalization then really what it allows the group to be able to do what they need to do, and they don't need to be told what to do. And I think that's what, you know, this directive leadership can again reduce satisfaction. If somebody's trying to micromanage them in a high formalization area, you know, what's the point? Like, leave us alone. We're going to do our job. Okay. Here's where we get into you know, transactional versus transformational. And transactional is, hey, if you do this for me, I will do this for you. You know, and it's and in a lot of cases, it doesn't involve engagement. It's just a quid pro quo. You know, it's just you do this and I do that. Transformational, then all of a sudden now you're part of this shared vision. where the leader is inspiring you to say, hey, look at what we're going to do here. Look how you're going to feel. Look how, what's in it for you. I told you about that famous FM station, WIIFM. What's in it for me? If you create that piece, then you can actually get them to not only create a change, but create this meaningful, realization of this key great story vision that you want to create. Okay, so again, some people are just charismatic, and they can charm you to death, I guess, to get things done. But other people are visionary. So if you take a look at Elon Musk, he's not the easiest guy in the world to get along with, but he can show that story about, hey, this is where we're going, and this is what's going to happen when we get there. Whereas, and I think Jeff Bezos has sort of changed in a bit, but when he first started out, he was all about, hey, we're a team, and let's what do you need to be able to get this done, and how can I help you? But if you take a look at where that organization is going, it's a lot more vision oriented than what it used to be. Okay, so when we talk about leading teams, there's priority of the team leaders. Well, not only do they have to manage the team, but they have to manage the external boundaries. Like, how do they bring in resources? How do they work the small p politics with collaborating with other areas? And then they facilitate the team process. And the leadership roles of team leaders, well, when they're collaborating with outside, that's liaison, right? They're troubleshooting, they're doing conflict management, they're coaching, right? So that's the key part of that. And understand the difference between groups and teams. All right. So two or more interacting independent individuals who work intensely on a specific common goal, it's what they're doing is, you could compare these work groups as, say, a call center. Well, they need to share information, but their accountability is individual. I mean, they're running, their performance is being monitored by a computer, and their skills could be random and varied. But teamworks, it's a collective performance. It's the overall success of, the interdependencies working to create, some value for an organization. The synergy is very positive, and there's individual and mutual accountability. Everybody's got everyone's back, and the skills are complementary. Right. So that's know what the difference is between that. So again, I talked about Tuckman's stages of group development, and I'm hoping that you did get some inspiration around the video when you were doing your learning team charter, and understanding what your group's going through, so you could take this into other groups. And again, some authors have gone a little bit further than the Tuckman, and they added adjourning, right? So I just want to talk about adjourning, all right? So what you can have is a team is so successful, they don't want to stop doing what they're doing. And and when you have projects in an organization, they should be an end date, and there should be an adjourning and passing things on. And people want to prolong their success. And what could happen is that they could actually obstruct a new development that's coming in because it's so successful. So just be aware of that. But I think it's self-explanatory. Forming, you're just coming together, you're sizing everybody up. Storming, you're starting to establish the pecking order of what's going on. Norming, you say, hey, this isn't working right now. We're at odds. How do we come up with some standards to work for? How are we going to behave? And then when the standards are put out, then they start performing. And again, at the end of the project, well, then they celebrate it, they recognize, and they get ready to pass on the information and institutionalize the process, and then move on. All right. So here's a key thing to know, about storming. Okay. A manager will let storming go on, because what happens that if you don't let the issues surface, they'll get hidden. And then when a major problem comes up, because they weren't resolved in the storming stage, it will interrupt the progress of the group. Like, oh, I didn't sign up for this. Well, why didn't you talk about this 3 weeks ago, right? So communication of feelings, view themselves as individuals, resist control by group leaders, intergroup conflict. You get this stuff done, when, right after, you've come together and from the forming stage. So that's really key. And then you go through the rest of it. Just, this is just interest. Deloitte did a great article on transformation. If you want to know more, that's what that's all about. And knowing the difference between transformation and change, both are important, right? So, the change, that's working the tools, subscribing to that vision, and doing the fixes, tactically getting things done, focusing on the methods. And there's a whole science and capability around change management. There's no doubt about it. But then understanding that change is a means to really undergo a transformation, right? So transformation needs, a desired end state, a vision. It's driven by strategy. It creates the future. It focuses more on mindsets and beliefs, because sometimes, you need to get over these key hurdles that people might think are overwhelming or unachievable. And it's the mindset that carries you through to be able to find those solutions. And then having the external influence, it's minimal, because, it's come together and people have conviction, and they're going through. All right. So here's the piece around change management, and there is a couple of questions in the test about change management. They're coming, all right? You'll see some highlights here. But what you have is there's different components in change management. There's the structure of it all, work specializations and stuff. There's the technology, the process and methods, and then there's the people. I'm just going to show you this little piece here. Is that what drives change? Sometimes it's an external change that will push the organization to the wall and say, hey, you need to change internally, to be able to adapt that. Sometimes it's done inside. People are saying, hey, this isn't working. We have to do something. So that a need for change, there's external forces and there's internal forces. Sometimes a competitor will come into the new market and start eating, company's lunch, and they'll say, hey, we need to change our strategy. We need to do all these pieces. So that's where this is. So this is just a survey that I saw. It was done, back, a couple of years ago in North America. And they said, well, why do efforts fail? And they asked the people, why do you think they fail? And people saying, well, it's the processes, it's the technologies that we're using. And, oh, it's, if we had, a better way of getting things done or whatever in the infrastructure. And then, oh yeah, well, and then sometimes, there's people problems or whatever. And then they looked at the causes, and lo and behold, it's all about the people, really, why efforts change. And what does that come down to? Management principles. Comes down to being strong managers, to be able to understand the situations and how to find those solutions. So that's the key part about that. And the thing is too, is when you're going through change, you've got to understand, commitment versus compliance. So commitment building costs are significantly less than the cost of managing post-implementation resistance. All right. So the thing is that if you get them committed right from the start, then compliance just comes naturally. All right. So understanding why do people resist certain change, and so go through these pieces in terms of the technique, when it's used, what's the advantage. So the uncertainty, the habit, you need to change habits. Sometimes you need to get to success habits. People are concerned about, well, what am I losing? Somebody sees that all of a sudden their department has been cut in half. Well, does that mean we've lost some influence? I don't like this change. I don't like this transformation. So that's where that's going. And something I learned, I did my master's based on this, is that If you can make it much easier to make that change, doability, if you can increase the doability, and if you increase the urgency of it, hey, we need to do this tomorrow because if we don't, we're going to go bankrupt. Well, then you'll get a higher level of change. So doability and urgency is a really big thing. And this is something that you as a manager should really understand, right? Is that if you look at organizational performance and when you're starting a transformation, things start at a certain level, and then as people start seeing that they're losing something, the performance starts dropping and it gets down to a dip. And this happens in every project that needs a transformation. There will be this dip, and Anderson used to call this, Accenture now, the valley of despair. And if you know this is coming, you get ready for it, because any kind of changes that you're making, you celebrate those changes, you communicate them, you say, hey, this is what's working. And then once you get past that piece and people see that things are starting to turn around, then they jump on the bandwagon, right? And they do this, they get it done. So you can see, the change curve, it's we're leaving status quo and there's a little bit of shock. But now when you're getting down here, you're into like disruption that leads to anger and fear. And then then they start looking for ways of going on. And if you can encourage exploration, then you start getting acceptance. And as you're celebrating all these newer wins, well, then you start rebuilding. All right. And what it is that at the end of the day, it takes time to do all this. And if you rush the change, you're never going to get there. So what you need to do then is you start getting compliance, you start getting adoption. But here's where you start integrating it into, this is the way we do things now, so you institutionalize that change. And then when that's institutionalized, people say, hey, this isn't, flavor of the month, this isn't going away. And they start internalizing, and that's where you get a sustainable transformation. So that's what that's all about. So knowing that, William Bridges, probably one of the better books I ever read. The states of transition. You go from the endings to new beginnings, and the whole idea about that is that in the neutral zone, use what you have that's still working to be able to get you to the new beginning. This thing will help you in your life. It'll help you in corporate. It's still very relevant today. Changed the way I approached, the way I do things. Okay. So here's something that's likely going to be a test question, right? So Lewin's 3 phases of organizational change. So what you do then is that you unfreeze. So what's going on is that you say, oh, you know what? The way that we're making this widget right now is not working. It's costing us so much money. We're not making a profit. Here's where where our losses are today, and here's where our losses are going to be in 3 weeks from now. So what basically you've done is, you've opened it up, you've unfrozen, what's going on, and you share all that information. And then you introduce the intervention. What is it that we're going to do? Well, there's some learning processes, there's some action planning and steps. And then what you need to do then is refreezing. You evaluate that change. You've designed your systems. Okay, gets back to this. You start institutionalizing and internalization of that transformation, and that's what gets you to the into the refreezing. So you got to institutionalize that change. All right. So these are the key words: unfreezing, changing, and refreezing, and understand what they are, and a little more background on what that's all about. Just a quick one. This is not a test question, but I've done a lot of transformation in my career, change management and those kind of things. And sometimes organizations introduce too much change, and you need to have some time to digest particular change. Otherwise, there's a lot of fatigue that comes in. So, that's different ways of looking at, is the organization ready for the next little leap of change? And you do that assessment, and these are some of the key areas that you do that within. Okay, so preparing organization for change, you describe the vision in the present tense That's what you got to, you talk about the future as if it's today, so people can see themselves in that change. And you make sure that, there's diverse teams so that you've got that richness of different points of views and diversity to be able to come up with great solutions. And you encourage these change leaders. You can have thought leaders all through an organization. The person that's preparing lunch in the cafeteria can be a thought leader and drive change in an organization. It's to understand who those mavericks are and empower them. Give them the tools to be able to to bring change about. All right. I tell you a little story about that, but we're running out of time. So now we're into communication. I said we're going to get into the technology of it a little bit. And the thing is that here's what's to know, right? It's a transfer of understanding and meaning from one person to another. And that's why picking the right channel is so important. I mean, you don't send an email out saying that the company is going to lay off 3,000 people, in the next 2 weeks. You start preparing them for them. You start having talks. You start having situational, forums to let people know what's going on. And when the complete message reaches the intended receiver, it's all about how that receiver will translate that message. So if you've got an uptight employee thinking, that they're going to get laid off in the next 2 weeks and they've got all these bills to pay, when you send a message out to them, you better be careful on how you put that, because they may misinterpret or overreact to that situation because of where they are. So you need to understand where that messenger is. All right. And the receiver understands the message the way the sender intended it to be understood. So that's the whole key around the communication process. So what do you have? You have a sender, you have some encoding. That's when you convert the message to, to a symbolic form. You have the purpose of the communication, and then you have the channel. So these are 4 components that you really need to understand. And then looking at the receiver who decodes that message, and then you need feedback. And there's nothing worse than sending out an email, asking someone to do something, and you don't get a reply. So as a business person, I'm making a case for, when you do get an email, it doesn't matter what kind of email, respond to it, right? And it completes the communication, and it lets them know that you understood. It lets them know that you're on board or not on board or whatever. So that's key in the communication. So here's the highlight right here. Understanding the process: sender, encoding, channel, decoding, receiver, feedback. All right. And all around that is some noise. So that's the key thing to understand in this piece. So communicating effectively when undergoing change, well, it's communication. All right. Just like in real estate, it's location. And the more that you can communicate, you can't under communicate. All right. The more that you communicate, the better that you're going to create understanding, and the less that you're going to lessen frustration and anxiety, going through, and that's what's key. So have a good look at this piece. All right, so here's now in the decoding of that communication, and you can see there's a lot of information around here. How a receiver feels when a message is received will influence how they interpret it. They can interpret that differently. So beware of that. When you're actually putting that message together, on how you think that receiver can decode that message. Okay. Just a little bit about appreciative inquiry. You can see that it's highlighted. What is it? It's basically, you start with what's working. What are we doing right? You find the bright spots of that and say, how can we take advantage of what somebody in one area of the company is doing well and succeeding to help another area. And appreciative inquiry is all about the glass is half full, right? So So the thing is that, you have a half full of glass and somebody will say, well, it's empty, it's half empty. You say, no, no, it's half full. And you talk about what's working for you. All right. You know, and and you identify, what's working for you, what's not working for you. Then you do a little dreaming on, okay, what it could be. All right. And then you talk about what it should be. And then that's where the vision comes in, and now you start delivering on that vision. So you focus on the strengths. That's what appreciative inquiry is all about. You focus on what's working, to create a vision about what the organization could become. So here's what active listening will do. Not too many yellow spots on there. But look at creativity versus innovation. Understand the difference between creativity and innovation. Creativity is the ability to produce a novel and useful idea. Innovation, it's taking that idea and turning it into a useful product, right? So creativity is really important. And you can see that understand the steps in the creative process, and you should know, what illumination is. Saying, aha, this is how it works, right? Then you want to verify that, to make sure that it is happening, what is happening, and that's what you focus on, to be able to create that innovative process. Okay, we talked about this already. We talked about this. Uh, all right. Yeah, I'm not going to cover this piece here, but just understand, I think I mentioned a few things about that there is national culture and then there's corporate culture. And sometimes, especially if you're an international organization, you need to bridge that. All right. It's easier to change corporate culture, no doubt about it, because national culture is deep. It's in some cases hundreds of years, foundational. And it's values learned as a child. So that's really hard to do that. Um, okay, but knowing different types of cultures, clan culture, that's an employee-focused culture valuing flexibility, not stability. So clan cultures mainly have, like what do they call, seniors in the culture that kind of, take on people and translate the values through them. So uh, yeah, it's it's it it values flexibility. All right, uh, and then adhocracy culture, that's more of a entrepreneur culture. Where it's all hands on deck. We got to get this done because we got to stay in business. And then a market culture, very competitive. And we talk about. Michael Porter, in terms of market culture, very competitive. And then hierarchy culture, structured culture, valuing stability and effectiveness. And I think we talked about that a lot in terms of, a machine bureaucracy, or, a fire service where it's very structured because there's a lot of risks in terms of loss of life or loss of property. So those are the competing values frameworks in that, and understand where that is, to do that. Um, and that's it, right? So there's some extra slides here that you can go through, but that's the end of the piece. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm just going to shut the camera and the mic off, and come back at, let me see here, at 20, yeah, at 2:25, and then start the topic 9. All right. Now, this is topic 8. This is what you need to study to until test number 2. And then topic 9, number 9 starts with test number 3. All right. Just so that you know that. All right. So I'm just going to time out. If you have any questions, just put them on the chat. I'd be happy to address them when I get back in a few minutes. Okay. So I will see you at 2:25. Okay, I'm back. We're going to start with topic number 9. Just to let you know, this is kind of my wheelhouse. I love strategic planning. I actually ran a strategic planning process for TELUS for a few years. And I've done strategic plans for municipalities. I did one for the city of Barrie Police Force. It's close to my heart, right? So here we'll get started. Can you just give me a thumbs up to know that you can hear me and you can see the slide deck as well? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. All right. So again, there's some supplementary information. You can see Chapter 2 supports Topic 9, Slides 2 to 14 around environmental constraints on managers. And that's becoming more and more crucial or critical for managers to really understand what's coming down the pipe. And environmental scanning, and we're going to touch on that, where you do, different use different tools to do some scanning, and we're going to cover that in the topic itself. Okay, so what Robbins Chapter 2 is all about is you explain the external environment and why it's important, and how the environment affects managers. So that's what we're going to kind of focus on going through. And then Chapter 4 looks at planning and strategic management, going through and looking at the purpose of planning and the approaches to goal setting and planning and contemporary issues in planning and steps to strategic management, and then what kind of strategies managers use. And again, this is going to become more and more crucial to you, because as you start adopting artificial intelligence in your work program, you're gonna have to lean more towards the critical thinking and the strategic planning of things, because that's where you'll be able to contribute and support the efforts of artificial intelligence. Right, so that's pretty key. But understanding again, we're getting into a new era of management theories, a new era of management principles, and I want to take you back to triple bottom line. Where it's not just bottom line profit that people are working for now. Otherwise, we keep doing this, next generations just won't have the world that we have today. And we're already starting to lose it. You could see climate change just taking over in some areas of the world. So, it's about, environmental in terms of planning. It's about, the people in terms of societal requirements to, champion, trust and quality of life. And then, yeah, you got to make a profit to stay in business. And yet we open that up, and then it's not just profit, it's prosperity. And what drives triple bottom line, what triple bottom line drives is a circular economy in today's world. And you're going to see more and more about that. So you take a look at, circuit boards today. They used to be engineered to use, and then they got thrown in a disposal. In today's world, there's rare earths on those circuit boards. So the next step is they're designed to be able to disassemble, so that they're not causing people bad health and disassembling them to try to recover, some key components that they could reuse, or repurpose, those kind of things. So the circular economy really, it starts in the design. How do we design something to go beyond its life and then reintroduce most of its capabilities and save energy, and not have to dispose it somewhere to implement it and put it into another area? So it's this concept of cradle to grave design that you need to be aware of, in your management things, no matter where you are. So how do we kind of get the most out of what's going on? Okay, so what are the principles? Well, it eliminates waste and pollution. It involves designing durability, repairability, upgradability, and then regenerating natural system. It involves designing products and systems that can be recycled, repurposed, returned to the natural environment in a way that benefits ecosystems. One of the biggest things in our family, right, is that aluminum foil, right? Aluminum is one of the most energy intensive products going. And people use aluminum foil and then they throw it out. It should be recycled. I mean, that you can, you can really reduce the the carbon footprint by recycling that aluminum and recovering it. So one little commercial for that. Cradle to grave, it's material selection, the product design, the end of life management, and the systems thinking that goes around it. And what you do when you design a product now, you bring in all parties, even the user. All right. And then maybe the recoverer, that recovers something, all people, so that you can design this circular economics into every product and services that you possibly can. Okay, so we're not going to do breakout teams, so we're not going to look at this. But if you take a look at where we are now in the continuum of management principles, you can see that we're getting near the more modern pieces, and systems thinking is becoming a big part of it, and the quantitative in terms of total management quality, the contingency, and the behavioral, there. So we're really kind of on that area of it. Okay. Test number 3, just a quick one. It will be a one-timer. It's on June the 19th at 7 p.m. online. Get ready for it. It's topics 9, 10, 11, and 12, which means topic 13 is not going to be on the test. 50 multiple choice questions, primarily multiple choice, a couple of true and false, and then the lockdown browser and your webcam will be required. So, it's coming, get ready for it. Okay. Again, so here's, the pieces to understand. You can see that there's 4 chapters here, the Pearson Revel Robbins author, of what to take a look at to be able to do that. And then again, you're going to access, this link for the online test in topic 13. Okay, little bit more about Chromebook users. So I'll bring that in. Okay, so now we're getting into the participation topics of 9A, and we talked about the environmental scanning before we get into doing the strategic planning, and Pestel. In my day, we used to call it PESTEL. The L started before the E, so it doesn't matter what it is. It's all the same stuff again. But looking at those components of what's going on, and what I'm going to ask you to do is that use the template. All right, use the template. This is what the template looks like right now. You download that template, and then what you do then is that you're going to do this. For Tim Horton. You use what categories here are suggested categories, what applies, and then there may be some other categories that aren't mentioned here that you put in. So all the stuff that doesn't apply doesn't show up on this template. You just work with what you have, all right? And then you go through the critical thinking of why it matters. Why are we following this? What's going to be the potential impact? Why is this important? All right. So these are definers that you're going to do, and you do it for each one of those. And I'm not looking for a whole list of 100 or anything. The ones that are most important, to be able to give you a sense of how to do strategic planning, for Tim Hortons. Okay. So there's there's general economic factors, and what I'm looking for is specific stuff, not just general stuff that's out there on the, on the internet, stuff that's related to, Tim Hortons itself. And again, use AI to be able to extract that, and it's all coming down to, it's coming down to really doing this key analysis, why this matters. Why critical thinking matters. So instead of simply stating Tim Hortons is affected by the economy, well, a critical thinker will say analyzing how and why these economic forces impact Tim Hortons specifically, differently from other brands, right? How is it, that something that's going to come off the environment, that Tim Hortons can respond much better than McDonald's, or much better than Harvey's or whatever. All right. So that's what you're looking at. it's the level of depth that separates a basic PESTLE analysis from a truly insightful one. All right. So you're looking for insights. You're looking like what it comes down to, right? Strategic planning is all about competitive advantage. So how do I build and sustain competitive advantage? And how do I use the information that's coming to me to be able to do that? Okay, so I'm telling you right now, if you don't use the templates, I'm going to deduct marks. All right, so use those templates. Here's the links. You're going to use the PESTLE template, and then you're going to use the SWOT template. And I'm going to show you how that all fits, all right, in the next few slides. All right, and go from there. So again, you're going to do a PESTLE analysis, and then from that PESTLE analysis, you're going to identify SWOT factors that are specific conditions that impact Tim Hortons. All right, and then use those templates itself. So how this all works is that the PESTLE analysis really gives you, the environmental conditions of what's going on, right, in areas of political, environmental, social, those kind of things. All right. Then you take that and you actually do a SWOT analysis with it in terms of, what kind of opportunity does this particular factor in the environment provide for Tim Hortons, or what kind of threat does that provide? And then you look at inside the organization, and one of the best frameworks I've ever used is the McKinsey 7S. We I think we covered that, and then if not, we will cover that. But find out what's going on, and then find out, in terms of the structure. Well, are we, is there enough of a project management structure in Tim Hortons to be able to take a look at the line of products that it wants to bring to the market in the next 5 years? Oh, well, yeah, we have that. Well, it's a strength. Oh, tell me why that's a strength. Or no, we just do this on the fly, and we're not ready for any new any new product or offering that we bring in. It's a weakness. Well, tell me why that's a weakness. All right. And then from an opportunities and threats, Porter's 5 forces. Does a supplier have leverage on the hamburger that it supplies Tim Hortons, or the flour provider to McDonald's or whatever, those kind of things. So the Porter's 5 forces will address that piece. So that's how that comes together. So what it is then, here's the template, all right? And maybe this one, they're not relevant. You take them out, but home market is. Okay, so home market then, what are the factors specific to, Tim Horton, when it comes to home market, and what's rate the impact of that factor, and then what's the implication, is this something that you have to address in the next 6 months, or is this, a long-term thing, maybe 24 plus months, and then, is the implication, is this a positive, this is an opportunity, or is this an absolute threat? And then what's the impact? Is it increasing, changing? And then what's the relative importance, right? So you may have one, or this one and this one, and then, oh, by the way, your research had another one, and then you go across with these and do it. So I don't want you to do all these. This is just a suggestion list of what's going on, all right? And you can add pertinent general examples that are relevant and current here. So that's how to use that template. When it comes to the SWOT now, again, these 2 columns that are shaded, they're just examples. So what you do is you might, a positive competitive advantage aspect. Well, you may define that. Once you do that, this list goes away. You pick out, or there's others that maybe that aren't on this list that you put through, but essentially what you're submitting is these 2 columns, all right? And again, use the template. So on this side, it's strengths, and on this side, it's weaknesses. And only submit this part of the template, all right? And the thing is, a strength can't be a weakness. You figure it out, is it a strength or is it a weakness? And fill it out. And then, so what you're doing then is for 9A, you're doing the PESTLE analysis, and then you're doing the SWOT analysis for Tim Hortons. And I'm sure there's a lot of good information on the internet that you could pull off to do that. So essentially here, it's a reconstruction of what I just told you about. For strengths and weaknesses, that's more of an internal piece. So you're using the McKinsey 7S model for opportunities and threats. What you're doing is you're using the pestle analysis and you're using the five forces model. So that's what you do. Okay, so that's 9A. 9B and is I want you to do a balanced scorecard for Tim Hortons. And there's two deliverables. You do the balanced scorecard, and then you do the Tim Hortons balanced scorecard strategy map. So what you've done is you've put these, you've selected which ones that you're going to address in here, and then you're going to set a goal for that, and that goal then translates into a goal that's on this sheet. And how you show this is you show how the goals connect to each other. So on a strategy map, what you're doing is you're looking at the four components of the balanced scorecard. You're looking at learning and growth, which it really turns into organizational capacity, processes, customers, and finances. So here's where you start. So what are you doing in learning and growth? Maybe you've got two goals. Maybe it's even three, but I wouldn't put more than three. This is just an example. So maybe one's not enough, two probably, just to show you. And then what kind of organizational capacity, is your goal, there for? All right. And then that will support something, in your processes. All right. And there'll be a goal around your internal processes, and that will support something around, your customers. And sometimes one goal will support maybe two of these goals, right? So showing these arrows is really important on how they all connect, all right? Show the interconnections amongst the goals and link up the goals, all right? So again, I want you to use these templates. And oh, by the way, these templates, keep them, because you'll be able to answer some questions in assignment number 4 as well. And you'll have most of the work done for you, in terms of structure of, the templates and what you can use to reflect what you need to reflect for Amazon. Okay, so again, when you calculate mean performance by the balanced scorecard, what this is in this chapter, in this column, is that over the terms of the classes, students don't kind of take heed to what's going on. So what you do is, so if you've got two dimensions, that you've talked about in finance, two objectives or strategy that you've talked about in the finance dimension, well, then you take the score of the two and you average it. You see this one here in this example, there was 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So they all scored 4, but you added them together and you divided by 4. So it's an average mean performance on going this. And again, you'll have to do one of these if you decide to, in the questions you select to do in assignment number 4. Okay, so here's the piece again in a little more distinctive. So the order of analysis is, you look at improvements in internal capacity, which is learning and growth, right? That's improvements. And then those support improved internal processes, internal processes. And then the internal processes do things for customers, all right? Customer satisfaction. And then ultimately customers buy things, and that drives the financial results. So that's the order that you're going. And again, show the connections as you go through, okay? Okay, so, why do we need a strategic plan? Well, look, you can see this really very highlighted piece in terms of the company has to develop competitive advantage. And when you develop competitive advantage, you develop and you deploy it. And then at some point in time, it loses its, maybe more people come into the market and dilute your efforts, or the market gets saturated, they can only buy one gizmo from you and everybody's got the same gizmo. So it starts to decline. So that the strategic plan is going to address developing, deploying, and declining, right? So that's key. Yeah, that's probably a test question, right? Okay. And all managers, see that's highlighted, in some way they're doing planning, right? All levels of managers. They're always, even down here in operation, they're doing planning, right? But they're doing more on planning the logistics or planning on tactic, or here they're planning on tactics, those kind of things. So that's what to understand there. And then again, understanding, the responsibilities and accountabilities of levels of manager. So it's mainly the top level managers that create the strategic plannings. And there's a term called cascading. So, it starts from, the top, like when I was in TELUS, it was the holding company. There was a holding company called TELUS. And then inside of TELUS, there were subsidiaries. So TELUS would create this grand plan, pass it down to the subsidiaries. They would do their portions of that grand plan and then pass it down to the businesses that they own. All right. And it went down and down. And as you come down the levels, it gets more tactical and then it gets more operational, all right, as it goes through. So that's how plans differ in breadth, time frame, and specificity. All right. So you can see, how that really comes down. Okay. But the whole key is how everything fits together. If there's anything I learned in strategic planning is that the mystery is in their interdependencies. The development of competitive advantage is on optimizing what's going on in the interdependencies. That's where you'll get synergy. That's where you can really make hay. All right. So understand the what's really going on in interdependencies. And there's 12 skills that you really should hone as a strategic planner. Definitely you need analytical skills, but you need critical thinking as well. Why does it matter? What's key about this? What impact does it have? And then you need vision and strategic thinking around, okay, well, let's kind of think about as much as what we are going to do, what aren't we going to do? And that really kind of defines the trade-offs. Because defining the trade-offs is really key in strategic planning, because we all have, fixed resources, and we have to decide how to best use those resources, make the best choices to build the best and biggest competitive advantage and how to sustain that competitive advantage. All right. And then it takes leadership. Could be because you need to lead and inspire. And not only that, in the leadership part too, is you're extracting learning, because a plan may come out perfect, all right, based on the best analysis that happened at the time. And 10 days later, there's something that goes on in the environment that changes everything, right? So the people have to learn. And it's that learning that gets translated back into, the iterative process of shifting the strategy to be able to make that strategy real and consistent and sustainable. All right. Well, sustainable is an oxymoron, but keep it going as long as you possibly can. Right. And you need total communication skills, because everybody has to be bought into this. They got to understand that, especially across the interdependencies. So functional people in different areas of the company now you need to talk to each other, right? Those kind of things. And you definitely need financial acumen. You need to really understand the numbers, going through. And it's a project. It's a strategic plan is a project of transformation, right? So understanding that and knowing how to use change management skills and understanding the key aspects of how transformations get done. Definitely problem solving, definitely negotiating, because you're always negotiating for resources and attention and everything else. And you need to be very adaptable, very creative, and there's got to be all types of collaboration to really make this, a sustainable competitive advantage. So individuals can effectively contribute to this and drive their organization. And if you have those skills, then you've got the secret sauce to do that. Okay, but here's what's key, all right? The golden key, all right? the organization is made of parts, but you start to focus here on what's happening on the environment. And in our day and age, it's all destructive technology that we need to be aware of. And what destructive technology is, it's innovative technology that will displace older technology or even like modern technology. So the example I can think of, based on my age, right? So when Apple brought out the iPod, right, it put the entertainment industry, the recording industry, on its ear, because here now you could buy one tune, for at that time, I don't know, maybe 25 cents, and put it on that iPod, and you didn't have to buy a 25 $30 disc, and the middle people in that whole process were left hanging. All right, that's a destructive technology, and with AI and robotics, you can expect a lot of that coming on your way. Again, look at how important this is. It's all about creating competitive advantage where you develop, you deploy, and you decline. All right, and understanding that that decline is going. So how do you compensate? So there's different strategies dealing, on this piece, and that's why we're going to talk about the Boston Consulting Group later on, in terms of dealing with this part of the piece. But there's different ways of getting competitive advantage. Cost leadership, right? Differentiation. How can you be ultimately different where you offer something so different that it creates just a magnificent value for someone, and they will go to your shop to buy your product or service rather than go to someone else's. First mover advantage. You get in there and you clean up on tying up all the suppliers, or getting a big front end loading of customers that you can create loyalty with. As a first mover, than somebody coming in behind you, it's harder to do that. Time-based advantages, technology advantages, strategic alliances. This is key. Like, you might have areas where you have partners that can complement what you're doing, and you bring it into an industry, and no one can match, that the complementing thing. The Japanese are really good at this. All right. And be able to give you a leg up in the market. And you need employees that see the bigger picture. They need to be seen in there as a shared vision. So again, look at this piece, and here, just this makes me think of one of the chemical producing companies in the U.S. What they would do is they would come out with a new product that nobody made. All right, and they'd charge a whole pile of money for it because nobody made it, and it created. Then all of a sudden, a couple of followers would come in and make the same kind of of uh, of of product, and they knew this was coming. So what they would do then is that they did start dropping their prices, because then it was all about being a commodity and going to lower prices. They've gone from a leader in the industry, to a commodity provider, and that's all part of understanding the competitive advantage in the life cycle. All right, this just a quick one. I adopted this. This is the Xerox model from way back when. It's still current today. Here's where you start. The current state. Where are we now? What's the situation? Where do we want to go? What's the desired end state? And then it's a gap analysis. How do we want to get there? Right? That's all I'll tell you about this piece now. So again, strategic plan needs to align with the organization's mission, its vision, and its value. All right, and its core values. All right. So the mission is, what business is the organization in? What's it currently doing? The vision is, what's that desired end state? What does it need to look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? And people talk about, you should have a picture, you should have a movie of, what's going on in your vision. And then their values, their core values, the shared beliefs of the stakeholders, of all of them, all the parties, and again, Here's something that I developed, here's kind of the vision leads to the mission and goals and objectives. But this is where the organization runs. The value proposition is what keeps customers awake at night and how you satisfy that in terms of providing value, what strategy you use, to be able to put it into the market, because competitive advantage is all about strategy. And then what business model do you create to package that competitive advantage? All right. So if your strategy's right, your business model builds competitive advantage, then it's all about execution of the value proposition, just so you know that. All right. And again, look at another key here. Formulating strategic management is formulating, implementing, and evaluating cross-functional decisions, so that everybody's working together. You're building and implementing a strategic plan across the organization, and everybody is going in the same direction. That's called alignment, and there's a lot of power in that. And then how will that organization achieve and sustain a competitive advantage? And I think sustain it's a limited term because your competitors they catch up to you. So strategy is a long-term plan that determines the direction of the organization. So that's a key thing to remember. This is just a platform that I've used, probably the best one that was ever around when I was using it, just an advertisement. If you ever want to do, bring it into your company, here's where you could start. And it automates the strategic planning process. Here's a model that, you start with the environmental effects, and then you look at, what's the company all about? What kind of competitive methods are you going to use? Where are you going to play? What's our segment market? And now, here's where, the environmental scanning of, say, pastel translates into what are the strengths and weaknesses of that, and how are we going to address the opportunities and threats, in terms of long-term objectives. So you want to create basically a strategic house, and this is based on your corporate core values. I mean, that's the foundation, right? And then there's, your vision will break down into various strategic focus areas, because you got to break this down, and these are the key ones that will get you where you need to know, and you need to understand what are the critical success factors, in going in these areas and exploring them. And then, what is our vision and mission? So this is how it all comes together. All right. Again, hey, see this key? Evaluate the current performance. Where are we now? The first step. That's key in the strategic planning process. The starting point, getting that baseline. See, here's another process that I created in my little consulting company here. All right. Here's where the McKinsey 7S, comes in and, helps with determining, the opportunities and threats. All right. And then here's how you can phase this piece in, where you do an external and an internal environmental assessment. You formulate that strategy, into, areas, critical focus area, critical success factors, issues and goals, and then you implement, and then you evaluate and control, and what gets measured gets done, I keep saying. All right. Again, the strategic plan, we talked about this, going through. And again, it's a cascade, strategic to operational, so here's the lower management, here's the tactical and middle management, and here's the strategic that's created at senior management levels. And here, when I talk about cascading, so a company goal, will cascade down. There'll be several departments that will have a specific department goal, but fits to that company goal. And then there'll be people that are running projects in that department that will have specific goals that will run to those department goals. That's how you cascade down. Okay, so how will you measure success? What key performance indicators, metrics matter? How are we going to track them? All those pieces. And those are all the benefits of strategic planning. And again, realizing that this is a transformation. And what do you need? Well, you need buy-in, right? You need continued commitment. If you don't have commitment, then you just have compliance, and compliance weakens, when something comes up, right? And then you have resource allocation, and then alignment. Everybody is going in the same direction. going through. Here's the pieces of the pestle that I talked about. There's the breakdown of all these pieces that you're going to learn how to use. So, you should understand what is a political component of the pestle, what's an economical component. Here's the template that I talked about, and here's a little more about McKinsey 7S. This is just this is just an illustration of the actual names of them, right? And then knowing, what is it about the five forces of Porter's five forces, and then how to deal with that in terms of, what's possible in the rivalry among existing competitors in terms of the growth, in terms of the concentration. So these will, give you some ideas of what Tim Horton should be affected by, those pieces. Here's another template that I created that allows you to look at the competitors of in terms of what's current, and what's future, around that piece. The SWOT process, there's different ways of looking at the SWOT process. So sometimes you look at the strengths and opportunities, and then look at the strengths and the threats and how they could interact, the weaknesses and the opportunities, and then the weaknesses and the threats to give you more ideas about what questions should you ask, and then how do you characterize the issues into problems or opportunities, right? Some of it's matching strengths and opportunities. Others is convert threats or weaknesses into strengths or opportunities. And then here's some other areas, and that's a key to know what's going on there. And the SWOT, the strengths, activities the company does well, weaknesses, the activity company does not do well, so it's all then highlighted, so you should know what that is. And here, you're finding these, you're finding these in the pestle, and then you're working them down into the SWOT analysis, into what does that mean in terms of an opportunity, and what's the impact and the timeline and those other things. Okay, so here's some different examples of that piece. And again, I covered this before, but you do this environmental scan first that translates into a SWOT analysis. The pestle will give you more around the opportunities and threats. It may indicate some things around your strengths and weaknesses, what to look out for, based on what some of the trends are. And then the Porter's five forces will kind of, give you some enlightenment on what to look at. And then the McKinsey 7S will tell you, oh, hang on, we need to update our information systems because we don't have enough real-time reporting to be able to address, the market turnaround. So those are the kind of things that you'll work into. And just a reminder, this is all I want from you in the template when you submit that. This is just to help you. It's adjustments. So precursor to generating goals. So you do that environmental scan. You can see that there's a pestle, there's that internal analysis, there's a competitive analysis, or five orders. Then you develop them into strategic issues. So you create those problem statements. Some are good problems, some are bad problems, all right? And then you formulate the goal. So that's a sequence. We went through this in your assignment number 3, to use this template, and going through those, all right? Not going to do any breakouts. Okay. Yeah, so goals are working, goals are designed, written in terms of outcomes, from X to Y, where are you going? Specific time frame, challenging, those kind of things. Not going to talk about that. This is just an ad. This is the best information I ever came across in terms of, creating goals. It's the Franklin Covey Institute. You can click on that and find out more about that. And then another thing about goals is that you chunk goals down. A goal might be too overwhelming. So you break it down into objectives. And then an objective you might break down into tactics. And the tactics, you might break down into action plans. So strategy at this point here is more specific than a goal. Okay. Here's some other things about looking at, a goal. I came up with this piece about it's two parts. It's outcome driven and it's behavior changing. So this isn't on the test, so you don't have to worry about that. But this is on the test. This is the Boston Consulting Group matrix. All right, and it analyzes product mix, and that's part of the downward trend on strategic planning. Now, how do you manage that? So if you want to gain market share, you'll need to invest in a competitive product mix. Market share gains have potential to generate cash surplus, those kind of things. But here's the piece. All right, this is growth opportunity goes from low to high, and market share goes from low to high. Right. So you milk the cash cow. So a cash cow is this very profitable business that it's almost maturing, right? So it doesn't have very much growth. It's saturating the market, but hey, it's got a really high market share and good returns. So you want to milk that cash cow until nobody wants it anymore, right? Whereas divesting, you might have a business in your portfolio that it's not growing at all and it doesn't show very much opportunity. Well, then you want to get rid of it. You want to divest it. Sometimes, you've got high growth opportunity, but it's not too accepted in the marketplace. So the thing is, though, this is something to consider. This is normally what happens is that all of a sudden, some trend changes, or the people get educated on how to use your product, and all of a sudden then this could land up, as a star. And a star is, high growth, high market share. And that's really where you want to pick them. All right. So this is a key thing to understand for test number 2. All right. Understand what these are all about. And the whole idea is that understand that these are, this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis. Right? So high growth, high market share, right? Whoops, high growth. Hang on. Oh yeah. Okay, high to low and low to high. So this is high growth and high market share. So there's the stars. This is a little bit flipped here on this side. So don't be confused. Go by this slide piece here. If you want more information, here's an article that you could read. And then hope is not a strategy. And you gotta, in some cases, people will just, they get discouraged in the marketplace, and then they just kind of think that if they think of it long enough and whatever, it'll turn out. And no, it doesn't work that way. All right. So you need to be flexible. You need this learning capability in the organization to know that, hey, this isn't working. We need to recalibrate. You need plans. You need tactics. And again, like I said, it's as much about what you don't do as what you do. All right. That's what to think about. And again, you can see that in the strategic planning scheme of things, this is highlighted, and this is a highlighted arrow. It goes from very broad to very specific. Like these strategies, relate to specific goals. All right. And then from these strategies, there will be specific action plans, right? So it goes from broad to specific. Okay. And then now knowing that there's 3 levels of strategy. So again, it's the big umbrella. So you go from corporate strategy, where are you going to play? Are you going to go international? Are you going to be just steady as she goes? Or are you going to kind of recalibrate, re-entrench to, go to greater heights? The business strategy, you get into Michael Porter stuff around cost leadership, differentiation, and market focus. And then the functional strategies, when you get into the specific functional areas, that they have to do things that are, function and industry specific to, what they're doing in their business, and work that through. So that's a cascade again, going down. So the corporate strategy, can break down into growth, can break down into stability, and can break down into retention. And you should know a little bit more about growth strategies. So what kind of growth strategies are there? Concentration. Well, concentration is saying, hey, we're just going to make donuts. That's it. Um, Backwards, vertical integration. Oh, but you know what? We're going to buy a flour company because we need to lock in our supplier to make these donuts. Forward integration. Oh, you know what? We're going to start having kiosks on colleges so we could sell our donuts. Horizontal integration. Oh, well, you know, we're gonna buy out, ABC donut maker, and it will become, a bigger operation. Then related diversification. Oh, you know what? Um, People that buy donuts, well, they eat hamburgers too. So maybe we're going to buy a few, hamburger places because hey, our distribution is common. I mean, we can leverage a lot of our pieces. And then this one here, unrelated diversification. Oh, we're Procter and Gamble. We're going to get in every part of business we possibly can. We're going to do health products. We're going to do cleaning products. We're going to do office products, right? So unrelated diversification. But here's where you need to start thinking about, there's something in there around turnaround in retrenchment strategies because this is pretty common. So I put a little bit more explanation around turnaround, so that you know what that is. And then it addresses serious performance issues. So the best example I can come up with is Steve Jobs. He basically got kicked out of Apple in '85, and then the company went downhill. All right, so they called him back 12 years later. That's after he created Pixar and everything else, and then he rejoined in a new strategy, enthusiasm, and really got Apple focused. That was an absolute Apple turnaround strategy. So what is it? It's corporate renewal. It typically involves fundamental, often radical change. Jobs says, hey, you know what? We're not going to do 50 products. We're going to do 7, and we're going to do them really, really good. That's just an example. I can't remember what the numbers are, right? And this is, we're going to change the way people live their lives. And our core business model is going to be, we're not going to be in the manufacturing business. We're going to be in the design and the retail business, and we're going to source out the manufacturing in a certain way where our competitive advantage is not compromised, right? So those are key things. And then there's my hero, Michael Porter, generic strategies, and if you take a look at it, it breaks down into total market and to niche market. All right. And in the total market, you can have, a cost leadership or a differentiation, right? But then you can get into a niche market where you can be cost focused. So, you might think that, hey, there's a particular seniors market that needs a particular product. Hey, we're gonna make it the most economic product for seniors because they're all on fixed income, right? Or hey, you know what? There's some people here that like to have these fancy, crazy looking cars, and we're going to make this car so different. It's gonna, and it's going to be focused on these high income people because of vanity, right? So that's what this is all about in terms of generic strategies. But there's some disadvantages of doing in a niche market because sometimes they don't last very long. So where do you think no frills is on this thing? Well, I put them right here. Cost leadership, right? No frills. It's all based on trying to get, the best prices out there for the market. And people will shop there rather than go to Sobeys or, so that's the way it goes. So there's differentiation, there's overall cost leadership, and then there's focus. You focus in a particular segment only of differentiation or focus in a particular segment, to do something low cost. Okay, cost leadership, Walmart, focus strategy, it's a very narrow market, and demand may disappear or lose its uniqueness. So you got to understand the risks if you're going to get into that. And then there's functional strategies. That's when you start getting down into the functions, to get you to market and whatever. Okay. This is what the value scorecard looks like. and you can see here where, the financial, you'll have objectives, you'll have measures, you'll have targets, you'll have initiatives, and again, in our area, we talk about goals, and that's where, you're going to pick up on the goals to be able to do the balanced scorecard in your Tim Hortons example, and then do the strategy matrix for Tim Hortons. Okay. Okay, so here's a strategy map example. So you can see how this is put together, right? So have a take a look at that, right before you start doing your Tim Hortons piece. Here's what it could look like, and here's how it all. I remember I told you a particular goal. I think I did this for a company here. Yeah, I did. This is one of the pieces of work that I did for an organization, and you could see that this particular, organizational capacity goal affected every other goal in the internal business. So you can see that there might be more than a few arrows going through, but the whole idea when you do your Tim Hortons is show me these arrows, because you got to see how it all comes together, and that's why it's called a map. And so people can really understand, the key interdependencies of what's going on, right? Okay, we talked about that. Okay, this is another key thing. This is an old guy, management by objectives. This came out many years ago. I think it was Peter Drucker that brought these out. And the thing is, it still goes around. And what it is, its goals are set at the top and broken down into sub goals for each organizational level. I talk about cascading, right? And then inside that organizational level, the manager then will go to their direct reports. And then their direct reports will go to their direct reports. And they jointly set goals amongst, the two parties, the manager and the subordinate, and set this up. So that's what MBO is all about. You should know, what this is. And it's goal setting, that keeps on going and working, right? And here's some of the reasons why they do that. Not going to talk about that. Just the cascade of strategic choices, just an add-on. Not going to talk about that. All right, so there's an addendum. Just want to talk about how important in today's world that systems thinking is. And you really can't talk about strategic planning and doing it right without talking about, using system thinking to bring in all those interdependencies and see how they all work to be able to create competitive advantage. And also, it's another thing that's going to come into play, and here's where AI is really good at, is doing scenario planning. So you put together a few plausible scenarios, around your strategic planning and see how they work out, right? And some may work out better than others. And it really gives you insight, because scenario planning gives you a sense of how to predict roughly. And from scenario planning, it's not only the planning itself, it's the rich discussions that all the players have when they're going through it, because they'll leave and maybe something will happen in their area and it will trigger some knowledge or learning that they learned, and they'll be able to deploy that and then share that with the organization. So that's key as well, right? A little bit about that. Rich pictures, and I'm not going to talk about that, and not going to talk about that. So that's it. All right, that's it for section number 9. Again, that's part of test number 3. Section 8, I'm hoping that I gave you enough highlights and bolded characters and keys, and hints to be able to really pick out what you have to study. I know there's a lot of information, but hopefully, try to use that approach that I've created for you to be able to lower the burden of studying. And again, you got a few days now before you can get into that test. So, study hard. Okay. And if you have any questions, please email me on my RDP again, because I can respond a lot quicker. And if I feel that this can help your peers, I will anonymously put the question on announcements and then provide the answer for everybody. Okay. wish you the best. I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll talk to you later.